The Philosopher's Dream, a journey through truth, doubt, and the infinite search for meaning. Introduction, a journey through the infinite. What compels a person to seek meaning in a world filled with contradictions? Is it an insatiable curiosity, a fear of the void, or perhaps a quiet hope that somewhere, amidst the chaos, there exists a thread of truth waiting to be unraveled? This book is not an answer to those questions. Instead, it is an exploration of them. An odyssey through the fragile and luminous terrain of the human experience. The philosopher's dream begins where certainty ends, in a realm where logic and emotion collide, where reason and mystery dance in delicate tension. This is a story about one man, Elias Marrow, a philosopher disillusioned with the rigid constructs of his discipline, who dares to venture beyond the safe boundaries of what he knows. It is a journey through both the dream world of Logos and the waking world, a duality that mirrors our own lives, the internal landscapes of our thoughts and fears, and the external realities we navigate daily. Elias's journey is not just his own. It is a reflection of humanity's eternal search for purpose. In his Odyssey, he encounters challenges inspired by the great philosophical debates, the isolation of solipsism, the paradoxes of existence, the allure of hedonism, and the unyielding rigidity of reason. Each step he takes through Logos challenges him to confront not only the nature of reality, but the nature of himself. Through it all, he carries the weight of loss, embodied by Clara, a kindred spirit whose memory serves as both a guide and a question. This book is part philosophical exploration, part surrealist narrative, and part emotional journey. It weaves together vivid dreamscapes, grounded reflections, and introspective narration to create a tapestry of wonder and introspection. It asks its readers to ponder alongside Elias, what happens when the answers we seek dissolve into more questions? Can meaning exist in the absence of certainty? And perhaps most profoundly, is the search itself the ultimate truth? The world of Logos is alive with metaphor and symbolism, a place where rivers carry regrets, mirrors reflect inner truths, and bridges demand the reconciliation of opposites. But the lessons of Logos are not confined to its dreamlike borders. They seep into the waking world, reshaping Elias's understanding of reality and his role within it. By the time he stands at the threshold of his final journey, Elias has discovered not a definitive answer, but a profound truth. That life itself is the act of seeking, and meaning is found not in the destination but in the path we walk. To read this book is to embark on a journey of your own. You may not find concrete answers, but you may find reflections of your own questions, your own struggles, your own dreams. You may find the courage to embrace uncertainty and the beauty of the infinite. The Philosopher's Dream is not a book for those who seek closure. It is a book for those who are willing to keep searching. It invites you to step onto the shimmering path and take the first step into the unknown. The road ahead is infinite, and its possibilities are endless. The search continues. Shall we begin? The Philosopher's Dream, Part 1, The Call to Logos. Arc 1, The Awakening. Elias begins his journey into Logos after Clara's cryptic note and his first encounter with the dream world. He struggles to adapt to this surreal reality. Chapter 1. The Note. Elias discovers Clara's mysterious message, Seek Logos. The world had become an echo chamber of silence, filled with the haunting reverberations of loss. Clara's absence was not a hole but an abyss, a chasm that stretched endlessly within Elias's mind. He sat at his desk, the weight of the world pressing against the brittle wood beneath his arms. Clara's note lay there, crumpled at the edges, its ink smeared as if it had wept with him. The words were simple, almost banal. Seek Logos. Yet they felt like an incantation, a spell cast across the fragile boundary between the known and the infinite. The air in the room was dense, a tapestry of stale coffee, dust, and unspoken words. Elias traced the note with his fingers, his mind replaying the arguments he'd had with Clara. Their debates had been thunderous affairs, clashes of intellect, where his conviction in the subjectivity of truth met Clara's faith in a universal order. She had always been the lighthouse to his drifting ship, the one person whose certainty made him question his own. And now she was gone, leaving behind this riddle. Seek Logos. The phrase gnawed at him, defying the precision of his trained philosopher's mind.
Logos, the word, the reason, the logic of existence.
But what could she mean? He whispered the words aloud, testing their weight. As the syllables slipped from his tongue, the air shifted. A subtle breeze brushed against his face, though the windows were closed. The hairs on his arms rose, as if the room itself were listening. That night sleep evaded him. He lay in bed, the note on his nightstand, its presence like a glowing ember in the dark. His mind drifted to Clara's funeral, the sterile condolences of strangers and the finality of her coffin sinking into the earth. But even in that moment of grief, he had felt something unresolved, a whisper in the silence, an invitation he had yet to understand. He closed his eyes, and the darkness swallowed him whole. Elias awoke not in his bed, but in a place that defied reason. The ground beneath him was soft, like the pages of an unwritten book, and the sky above shimmered with hues that shifted and danced, gold bleeding into indigo, crimson dissolving into emerald. He stood slowly, his movements sluggish, as if the air were thick with meaning. Around him stretched an endless plain dotted with strange symbols carved into the earth, their edges glowing faintly as though alive. "What is this?" he murmured, his voice swallowed by the vastness of the place. The words hung in the air, echoing back to him distorted, each repetition more fragmented than the last. "What? This is..." Then came the voice, rich and resonant, as if born from the marrow of the universe itself. "You have come to Logos." He turned, but there was no one there, only the horizon, infinite and unknowable. Yet the voice persisted, closer now, intimate. "You seek answers, Elias. But do you understand the weight of your question?" "I didn't ask anything," Elias replied, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. "Didn't you?" The voice laughed, a sound like glass shattering and reassembling into something more beautiful. "Every step you've taken, every word you've spoken has been a question. Even your silence is heavy with inquiry." Elias clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. "What is this place?" "Logos," the voice answered simply. "The realm of thought, of reason, of meaning. It is the bridge between your doubts and the infinite." The ground beneath him shifted, rippling like water. He staggered, his feet sinking slightly into the strange, pliant surface. Around him, the symbols carved into the earth began to glow brighter, their lines twisting and reforming. One symbol caught his eye, a perfect circle, unbroken and radiant. It pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "What do you want from me?" Elias asked, his voice trembling now. The voice softened, its tone almost compassionate. "It is not what I want, but what you seek. You have been called here by a question too vast for your waking world. Clara understood this. She gave you the key." Elias felt the weight of the note in his pocket, though he didn't remember bringing it. He pulled it out and unfolded it. The words "Seek Logos" glowed faintly, as if alive. He stared at them, his mind racing. What had Clara seen? What truth had she discovered that had led her here? And why had she brought him along? "Clara," he whispered. "She was here, wasn't she?" "Yes," the voice replied. "But her journey is over. Yours has just begun." The sky above shifted, the colors swirling faster now, as if agitated. The ground trembled beneath him, and the symbols began to rise, their edges breaking free from the earth. They floated upward, circling him, their light growing blinding. Elias shielded his eyes, but the light pierced through, flooding his mind with images. A city of shadows, a river shimmering with fragments of memory, a labyrinth that twisted upon itself endlessly. Each vision was vivid, surreal, and yet heavy with symbolic weight. "What am I supposed to do?" he cried out, his voice breaking. "Seek," the voice answered. "Seek, and you shall find. But beware, Elias. The answers you seek may not be the ones you desire." And with that, the world dissolved. Elias awoke with a start, his body drenched in sweat. He was back in his bed, the faint light of dawn creeping through the blinds. The note lay on his nightstand, unchanged, yet it felt different now. Heavier, as if it carried not just words but a command. He rose, his legs unsteady, and walked to his desk. There, he spread out a blank sheet of paper and began to write, his hand moving as if guided by an unseen force. The words flowed freely, unbidden. "The search for meaning is not a destination but an odyssey. Each step reveals not answers, but new questions. And so, the journey begins."
He stared at the page, his heart pounding. The compass on his desk glinted faintly in the morning light, its needle trembling as though it too was searching. Chapter 2. The Fall. Elias awoke to the sensation of falling, though he could feel no wind against his skin, no gravity pulling him down. The motion was both endless and stationary, as if he were tumbling through the memory of descent rather than the act itself. His body floated in a weightless abyss, the darkness around him vast and alive, pressing against him like a question demanding an answer. And then, without warning, the abyss gave way to light. Not the light of the waking world, sharp, yellow, and comforting, but something stranger, deeper. It was a light that shimmered and writhed, as if it were alive, spilling across a landscape that unfolded beneath him. Elias felt his feet touch solid ground, though the transition was so seamless he didn't know if he had landed or if the ground had risen to meet him. The air here was thick, like honey, and carried a faint hum, a chorus of whispers that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The whispers were not in any language he knew, yet he understood them on some primal level. They spoke of choices made and unmade, of truths uncovered and abandoned. They spoke to him. Elias opened his eyes fully and gasped. The world of Logos was unlike anything he had ever seen or imagined. The ground beneath him shifted constantly, a mosaic of textures and colors that refused to settle. Grass grew and withered in the span of seconds, its blades turning to shards of glass before melting into streams of silver liquid that flowed across the terrain. Trees sprouted from the earth, their branches twisting into spirals that reached for the sky before collapsing into dust. The sky itself was a kaleidoscope of shifting hues, an endless canvas of swirling blues, golds, and violets that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Ahead of him lay a path, or something that might have been a path. It was composed of stones that hovered inches above the ground, each one glowing faintly with a different color. They arranged themselves in intricate patterns that shifted as he stared at them, as though deciding whether to allow him passage. To his left, a vast river stretched into infinity, its waters shimmering like molten silver. Faces rippled across its surface, some familiar, some unknown, flickering like the remnants of dreams long forgotten. Elias stepped closer, drawn by the strange beauty of it. But the river hissed, and its surface shifted violently, as though warning him to stay away. To his right, a forest loomed, though calling it a forest felt reductive. Its trees were not trees, but towering pillars of light, their forms constantly breaking apart and reassembling, as if caught in an eternal dance. Shadows flitted between the pillars, moving with purpose, though Elias could not discern their shapes. He took a hesitant step forward, the ground beneath him rippling like water. The path of stones flickered, rearranging itself once more. He hesitated. Nothing here felt stable, not even himself. He glanced down at his hands and froze. They were translucent, his veins glowing faintly like threads of light. Panic surged through him, and he clenched his fists, willing his hands to become solid. Slowly, the glow receded, but the unease remained.
"Where am I?"
he whispered, his voice swallowed by the vastness around him. "You are where you have always been," a voice answered, rich and resonant, carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "And yet you are nowhere at all." Elias spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but saw no one. The landscape itself seemed to shift in response to his movements, the horizon bending and curling as if mocking his attempt to find stability. "Who's there?" he demanded. The voice chuckled, and the sound rippled through the air, causing the river to shudder and the forest to glow brighter. "I am Logos," it said. "Or perhaps I am nothing. That depends on what you believe." Elias frowned, his mind racing. Logos, the word from Clara's note. He thought back to the accident, the screeching of tires, the blinding flash of headlights, the weightless moment before impact. He had been sure he was going to die. And now this.
"Am I dead?"
he asked, his voice trembling. "Death is but a word," the voice replied. "Here, words are everything." The path of stones shifted again, forming a bridge that stretched out before him, leading toward a distant point on the horizon. There, a tower rose, impossibly tall, its surface glinting like polished obsidian. It seemed to pierce the sky itself, its peak vanishing into the swirling clouds above. Elias felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if the tower were calling to him. He took a step onto the first stone, and the ground beneath him hummed with energy. The whispers grew louder, their voices weaving together into a single question that echoed in his mind. "What do you seek?" He hesitated, unsure how to answer. He didn't know what he sought. Answers? Clara? Himself? The question felt too vast, too heavy to articulate. He shook his head and took another step, hoping the path would lead him closer to understanding. As he walked, the landscape around him began to shift more dramatically. The river narrowed into a stream, its waters darkening to black. The forest of light grew dim, its pillars crumbling into ash. The sky turned a deep crimson, and the air grew heavy with the scent of rain, though no drops fell. The whispers faded, replaced by a deafening silence. Elias reached the base of the tower and paused. Up close, it was even more imposing, its surface smooth and cold, reflecting his distorted image back at him. A single door stood before him, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. He reached out to touch it, his fingers brushing against the cool surface. The door swung open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. "Enter," the voice commanded, softer now, almost a whisper. Elias hesitated, his heart pounding. He looked back at the shifting landscape behind him, then forward into the void. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him, and the darkness consumed him. Chapter 3. The River of Time. Elias stood at the riverbank, watching as the water defied all logic. The current did not flow in a single direction. Instead, it twisted and coiled upon itself, moving forward, backward, and sideways all at once, as though it were not bound by time but by some higher, ineffable order. Shards of light flickered along its surface, each glimmering fragment reflecting moments, memories, that Elias could almost touch. He knelt, his breath catching in his throat as he reached toward the water. The river shimmered with recognition, ripples forming words that dissolved before they could be read. The closer he came, the more it seemed alive, vibrating with an energy he couldn't name. It called to him, not with sound but with sensation, pulling at something deep within him. "Time," Elias whispered. "It's alive." The voice of Logos rose again, soft yet unyielding, carried by the swirling wind. Alive? Or simply perceived? Does a river exist, Elias, if there is no one to witness its flow? Elias frowned, the question burrowing into his mind like a thorn. He had always viewed time as a construct, a human attempt to measure the immeasurable, to bind chaos with order. And yet, here it was, manifest before him, a river flowing in all directions, untethered by clocks or calendars. It mocked the neat lines and numbers humanity had assigned to it. He leaned closer, his fingers grazing the surface. Instantly, his mind flooded with images, memories. They were his, and yet they weren't. A boy chasing a kite beneath a golden sky. A woman laughing as she danced in a rainstorm. A soldier's tear falling as he clutched a crumpled letter. Each scene unfolded as vividly as if he were there, living them, breathing them. And then they vanished, pulled back into the depths of the river. He stumbled backward, clutching his head. What was that? "The river does not flow for you alone," Logos said. "It carries all moments, all lives, all choices. Time is not linear here. It is a vast ocean, and you are but one wave upon its surface." Elias sat on the shifting ground, his chest heaving. But that's impossible. Time is universal. It moves forward, second by second. It's the one thing we can't escape. Logos laughed, a sound like thunder rolling through the sky. Universal? Or merely agreed upon? Your seconds are another's eternity. Your forward is another's backward. Time is perception, Elias. It bends to the eyes that see it. Elias shook his head. But without time, there's chaos. How do we make sense of anything if it's all subjective? The river's waters churned, and a figure began to rise from its depths. At first, it was nothing more than a silhouette, but as it stepped onto the bank, it solidified into a person. A man, ageless yet ancient, his face a patchwork of features that shifted with every breath. He wore a cloak made of shimmering threads that seemed to flow like the river itself, each thread a different color, a different moment. "I am Kronos," the figure said, his voice a low, resonant hum. "Keeper of the river, guardian of what was and what may be." Elias stared, his throat dry. "Are you time itself?" Kronos smiled faintly. "No, I am merely its reflection, as you are. But I know its nature. You have questions, Elias Marrow. Ask them. Elias hesitated, then pointed to the river.
Why does it flow like that, in all directions?
Because time is not what you think it is, Kronos replied. He knelt and touched the water, his hand passing through it as if it were smoke. You see it as a line, past, present, future. But that is your perception, nothing more. Time is a web, a tapestry woven of infinite threads. Each thread is a moment, and they intersect, diverge, and converge endlessly. Elias frowned. But in the waking world, time feels real. It feels absolute. Kronos chuckled softly. Does it? Or does it feel like control? Humanity created clocks to cage time, to give it boundaries. But the river cannot be caged. It flows as it will. Elias glanced back at the river, its surface reflecting fragmented images of his own life. He saw himself as a child, sitting by his mother's side as she read to him. He saw Clara, her face illuminated by candlelight during one of their late-night debates. He saw himself standing in the wreckage of their last argument, her voice still ringing in his ears. "What happens when the river stops?" Elias asked. Kronos' expression grew solemn. The river does not stop. It changes. It shifts. But it never ceases, for time is not a thing that can die. It is the rhythm of existence, the pulse of the infinite. Elias stared at his reflection in the water. The face staring back at him wasn't his own. It was older, wearier, with lines etched deep into the skin. He gasped and pulled away. What does this mean? It means, Logos said, the voice now closer, that you must choose how you perceive time, as a master to obey or a tool to wield. Elias stood, his legs unsteady. If time is perception, then what is the truth of it? Is there no universal law, no anchor to hold on to? Kronos stepped closer, placing a hand on Elias's shoulder. His touch was light but steady, like the weight of a thought. The truth of time is this. It is both, subjective and universal. It is the river and the reflection, the question and the answer. You cannot control its flow, but you can choose how to navigate its currents. Elias closed his eyes, the words sinking into his mind like stones into deep water. Time wasn't the enemy. It wasn't a trap. It was a mirror, reflecting back whatever he brought to it. A tool, yes, but also a mystery, one that he might never fully understand. When he opened his eyes, Kronos was gone. The river continued to flow in its impossible, endless directions, and Elias knew he had to move forward. He stepped closer to the edge and, with a deep breath, waded into the water. It was cold and warm all at once, soothing yet sharp. As the current swirled around him, he felt himself dissolving, becoming part of the river. Memories, choices, possibilities, they all blended together, flowing through him. And then he saw it, a light in the distance, faint but steady, calling him onward. Elias took another step and the river carried him forward, backward, and everywhere in between.